Let's bring in Hilary Fordwich, President and founder of Strelmark. Hilary, it's great to see you again. The historic meeting between Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders has been held at the White House, and just shortly after wrapping up, German Chancellor told reporters that Putin has agreed to meet with Zelensky in the next 2 weeks. I mean, how significant is this?
Well, pleasure to be back with you again, Gabriella. It's really significant. Of course, none of this would have happened without President Trump because, look, he wants to be the president of peace. You can tell that he's out for a Nobel Peace Prize. And these European leaders, they didn't get it done. And actually, very interesting, something no one's talking about, Gabriella, where's the UN in all of this? The US spends 2.8 billion with the UN. I don't know how much Australia contributes, but how come they haven't convened this? How come this wasn't stopped earlier? But now I'm back to the point with regard to where we stand. Nothing is clear. The only thing is that clear that everybody has come to the table and everybody is willing to make some kind of deal to hopefully stop this. But the worst news is those drone strikes from Russia today and killing some innocent people.
Well, you make a great point. Where is the UN in all of this? And this could not be done without President Trump. Following Trump's meeting with Putin, we heard from US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who said that Russia offered some encouraging signs, including that Putin agreed to allow the US and European nations to give Ukraine Article 5-like protection as a security guarantee.
We got to an agreement that the United States and other European nations could effectively offer Article 5-like language to cover a security guarantee. So Putin has said that a red flag is NATO admission. And so what we were discussing was assuming that that held, assuming that the Ukrainians could agree to that and could live with that, and everything is going to be about what the Ukrainians can live with. But assuming they could, we were able to win the following concession: that the United States could offer Article 5-like protection.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that she welcomed the security guarantees for Ukraine and that the European Union is ready to do its share. And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky posted on X that this is a historic decision, that the United States is ready to take part in security guarantees for Ukraine. Hilary, just how crucial is this part in bringing the war to an end?
I do think, Gabriella, it's really important because obviously you really cannot trust Putin, anything that he said. So I think there needs to be enforceable and forces, and I don't know whether that's going to mean boots on the ground, whether that means observers, whether that's a sort of a coalition of US physical presence in terms of troops and European troops. I don't think that's been ironed out yet, but the US involvement to a certain physical degree looks like it is rather prescient.
Now, it was a different vibe entirely today at the White House between Zelensky and Trump. It seemed much more friendly compared to that meeting that was held earlier in the year. But there were some interesting moments today. Here is Donald Trump hosting world leaders, showing off his fight, fight, fight painting.
Not a good day. That was not a great day.
He has to make sure no one is missing that. And here is Italy's brilliant Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, rolling her eyes when the Chancellor of Germany tries to lecture Trump.
And let's try to put pressure on Russia, because the credibility of these efforts we are undertaking today are depending on at least a ceasefire from the beginning of the serious negotiations from next step on. So I would like to emphasize this aspect and would like to see a ceasefire from the next meeting, which should be a trilateral meeting wherever it takes place.
It's certainly not the first time she's been caught on camera rolling her eyes during high-level meetings. What do you make of that reaction?
Well, I think you're correct about her rolling her eyes. It's not the first time, but also it was also the grimace caught my attention, the way she's pursing her lips with a grimace at what he was saying. I actually remembered that when Trump was introducing all of those leaders at the beginning of the meeting, it actually fascinated me how he did, compliment each one. And he said that Keir Starmer was his friend and is doing a good job. I don't know how he thinks he's doing a good job or where he thinks he's doing a good job. But so certainly Giorgia Meloni, she is obviously doing very well in Italy and just what Italy needs. And I think she was disgusted, and you can see that on her face.
I want to talk to you about the media's reaction and the media's kind of meltdown when covering the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I mean, outlets like ABC, CBS were freaking out that the red carpet was being rolled out and there was a warm handshake. And MSNBC host Nicole Wallace was cursing on air while saying that Trump doesn't care about democracy. And then another host claimed that she was more prepared than Donald Trump for a meeting with Putin. Look at this.
The possibility of sanctions, it is not clear that any of that was discussed. It is possible we were more prepared for this meeting than he was.
Oh, you probably take that to the bank.
I mean, even from MSNBC and looking at their standard of coverage, which is pretty low, they're just outrageous claims.
Well, you know what, Gabriella? They can whine all they want. They can complain all they want. Biden never got this done. Putin went into Crimea under Obama's watch and nothing was done. And that gave him the signal that anytime there's a Democrat in the office, you can do what you want, because certainly he did not make an incursion while President Trump was in office in his first term in 2016. Crimea happened in 2014. So they can whine all they want. Like I said, it's the Democrats' basically fault for letting Putin, give me a naughty child and I'll give you a weak parent. And we had a weak presidency with Obama and Biden in terms of things abroad, and that's the result.
I want to talk to you about what's been happening in the UK over the weekend. Hundreds of protesters gathered near an asylum hotel after a migrant in his 20s was arrested on suspicion of assault. Now, The Sun reports that 6 demonstrators were arrested during the protest outside the Britannia Hotel. But Hilary, it really seems like there is a lot of frustration in the UK at the moment. It was reported last week that 50,000 illegal migrants have crossed the channel since Keir Starmer took office, and there's not a lot of signs that this is going to slow down.
You're correct there. I was in the UK recently to be on GB News in studio. And one of the things I can tell you is it was all I could do when I was going through customs, although now it's the machines, there's no human beings. I literally wanted to say, while I'm here, where's my free 4-star hotel, free meals, and could I have a new cell phone like the ones they're given, please? And some pounds, that would be really lovely. No, it's a sin that the British taxpayer is paying for this. And I can tell you what's getting even worse is now the government has seen all these protests outside these migrant hotels, and they're 4-star hotels, Gabriella, and they have gaming sets and televisions and game rooms. The only thing that's worse than that is the British government realizes where you have obviously an intense amount of migrants in an easily identified building. Now, instead, what could be worse than that? What they're doing is they're offering landlords 5-year contracts, more money than they'd ever make, and paying for all repairs and improvements to their property. If you're a property owner, how on earth do you say no to that deal? Meanwhile, the British taxpayer, the British citizen, can't find accommodation. There's a housing shortage. And so now the rental market will be consumed by the policies of the two-tier Keir government. And that is despicable. And there's going to be more civil as that unfolds, as well as what you mentioned earlier, which was the crime.
Yeah, no, it's a serious issue. Hilary, I wonder if you could give some Australians some advice, because it's been revealed that Australians are more concerned about Donald Trump's tariffs than the rising Chinese military threat. This is according to the latest news poll, which shows that Anthony Albanese's performance levels have returned to positive territory for the first time in 2 years. I mean, are you shocked reading about what's happening here in Australia and how Australians kind of feared Donald Trump's tariffs more than China?
Well, I will say this, Gabrielle, I think it's probably the same in Australia as it is in the US, that it depends what people are watching. I know there are many great people, friends of mine, when I gingerly ask them, what networks do you watch? They say, well, we don't want any propaganda, so we just want the news. And then they talk about the left-leaning propaganda networks. They don't even realize they're basically getting left-wing propaganda. And I would just to protect the Australian citizen. I think probably there's a lot of Australians who are just watching your mainstream media. They're not watching the Gabriella Power Hour, which they should be doing, but they're getting a perspective and they're being fed information which is everything negative about Trump. I don't think he's a perfect person, but I do think he's going to be the president of peace. I do think he's brilliant for the US economy. And as for the specific question with regard to tariffs, you know what? You could do with a prime minister who's doing as much for Australia and puts Australia first as we have in President Trump.
Absolutely. Well said. Hilary Fordwich, it was brilliant to speak with you as always. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, pleasure, Gabriella.